All right, so in this second video, I want to focus on a few problems that have to do with proportions. And again, this is a continuation of our test review for proportions and relationships. Since this is just a continuation of the last chapter, there's very little that actually addresses proportions directly on the test. We use it to solve all kinds of percentage problems, but this is one of the examples right here. And when it's already set up for you even, so all you have to do is solve it. So to do that, you have to cross multiply. So you do 7 times 18 and 12 times n. When you do that, you get 12n equals, let's do 12 times 18, and that's 216. Now, the next step is to figure out what is it that I have to divide both sides by, which is whatever's next to the end. So I have to divide both sides by 12. And once again, when you do so, 216 divided by 12 gives you 18. And so n equals 18, final answer. So all you have to do to solve the proportion once it's already set up is cross multiply and divide both sides by whatever's next to the letter, right? To isolate that variable on that one-step equation. And that's kind of the same principle you use when you're doing is-of problems. And even though those are percentage problems, I'm going to do them right now also, because it's going to help us when we're doing the rest of the test. Now, is-of problems, remember, is this idea that you look at the problem and find the thing that's is to put on the top left, and that's going to be whatever's closest to the is in the problem. Now, this 90 is also close to the of, but if you give the 90 to the of, then the 60 has nothing next to it, so it's got to be the is that's next to the 90. Here, there's no is, and that's because you have to find what it is. So the is close to the what. You know, it's what you're looking for. So it's going to be the x this time. And over here, 15 is close to the is. You also have to find out what's the of. And the of is the whole or the entire, the whole of the problem, right? So this case, you have the 60 that's next to the of, and the 70 that's next to the of. And in this case, the what is next to the of, so that means I am going to be looking for it. So the what is going to be the x there. And you're also going to look for the percentages. Now, this one doesn't have percentage because it's what percent. So I'm going to be looking for it. The x is the percent this time. This one has the 40%, and this one has 30%. So it's the number that's attached to the percentage, and that's what you put on here. And that's all over 100. Remember, percent means divided by 100. That's literally what it means. All right, so let's do these setups. I'm actually going to set them all up just like that, one at a time. And I always like to start the setup by looking at the percentage. So in this first problem, that's what I'm looking for. So I put an x where the percentage is. On this one, I am looking for the 40 is the percent. So I put that where the percentage is on the right side of that setup. And on the last one, the 30 is the percent that I'm looking for. So I am going to put that on the top right as well. And then I have to put the of in place. That's the thing I like to do next. And in this case, the 60 is the of. And then here, the 70 is the of, because it's the whole of the problem. And this is what I'm looking for. I don't know what the whole is, and so I have to put x. Lastly, I try to find my is's, and this one is 90. And then this one is what I'm looking for. I don't have it, so I put an x. And then this one is 15. So I'll show you all three kinds of problems: when you're looking for the percentage, when you're looking for the is, and when you're looking for the of. All right? Now, in all three of these problems, the next step is going to be to cross multiply, because you want to, after you set up the proportion, that's the next step. You have to cross multiply. And using proportions to solve percentages, this is-of setup is the easiest way to do it. So anyways, you're going to cross multiply. And I know it's kind of weird because I'm doing 3 problems at once, but it's basically the algorithm that you have to follow. And I'm trying to show you how to do that. You start by isolating the parts of the problem. Then you set out the proportion by putting the percentage on the top right, the of on the bottom left, and the is on the top left. and then you cross multiply. All right, so let's do that. For the first problem, you're going to get 60x equals 90 times 100. That's 99,000. So that's the cross multiplication step there. And then here you would have 100 times x, and then 70 times 40, which will be 2,800. So that's the multiplication step for that one. And then this one would be 30x equals 1,500 when you cross multiply. Now, next step of the algorithm is to divide both sides by what's next to the number, just like we did when we did a proportion problem right there. So let's do that. And here it's 60. That's next to my x. So I have to divide both sides by 60. And on this one, I have to divide both sides by 100. So notice it's not always divided by 100. It's divided by whatever's next to the letter after you do the cross multiplication. A lot of times you end up dividing by 100 because a lot of problems you're going to be looking for the part or the is. And so that's why it feels like you divide by 100 more often than not when you're trying to do these problems. But it's not always the case. So divided by what's next to the letter. And in this case, we're dividing both sides by 30 on the last one. And then they will cancel out on the left side. And then your answer would just be whatever the calculator says it is here. In this case, it's 9,000 divided by 60 is 150. Now remember, when you are looking for the percent, when the x is up here, you have to put a percentage sign because 150 is not the same thing as 150%. They're very different things. Remember, percent means divided by 100. So this is really the same thing as 1.5. That's what this means. That's very different from 150. So that's very important that you don't do that. So I like to put an answer in a box. Here, 2,800 divided by 100 is just 28. And that kind of makes sense because 28 is a fraction of 70. That's not quite half of it, but close because 40% would be half. So that kind of makes sense. And then this one is going to be 50. And there you have it. Final answers for these is-of problems, which is really just using a proportions to try to solve percentage problems. We do have a few others that we have to talk about here in this test that have to do with proportions. Let's look at that. So the other bit that has to do with proportions is this one, where they want to create an equation to represent the relationship in the problem. Now, the secret for that is remembering that when you're trying to create an equation for proportional relationship, it's always going to have this kind of y equals kx format. But k, your constant of proportionality, is always going to be, essentially, let me actually use color here to help us visualize what I'm talking about. So I'm going to use red for y and green for x here. Actually, let me just do purple for x and red. And then let's do orange for y. Okay, so remember that k is always going to be y divided by your x. So why does that matter? Because whatever number you placed on the top of your rate has to be the quantity that goes to the left on the equation. And whatever number you put on the bottom of your unit rate or your constant of proportionality has to go to the right of the equation next to the actual constant. All right? So there are always two ways you can represent the relationship, and that's why, but they chose, though, in these choices to put P, which is the peanuts, first. So you could have written cups first, but they put peanuts first. So if they put peanuts first, that means when you're calculating the K, you have to put peanuts on top and the raisins on the bottom, right? Because this is on to the left, it has to go on top, and what's to the right has to go on the bottom. And so the K has to match that orientation, right? So this one is 3 cups of peanuts. So this number on top here has to be the peanuts. And then this one has to be the raisins. But that's not right, all right? So that doesn't work. This one, though, does have 3 to 4, which is 3 cups of peanuts to 4 cups of raisins. So it has the right K. And so that is the answer that you're looking for. These with 7, they're just trying to make a play in numbers. You could have had the one where you actually have the cups to the left, and then the 4/3 would have worked because 4 cups to every 3 peanuts. But that's not an option that is given. But if in a test, there could be 2 options that are right if they actually have the flipped version. So you have to check for that. And that, my friends, is the parts of the test. There's one more. Almost went out of the video without it. So this last one here has to do with finding a unit rate because speed is a unit rate. But it's a unit rate where you have 2 fractions. But not to be afraid, miles per hour. Per means divided by. Remember that. Per, right? The word per in math means, wow, that is a really bad per. All right, so per is the same thing as division. So when we see miles per hour, that tells you how you're supposed to set up your rate. Miles on top divided by the hour. But we have fractions. So what we have to do is the 2/3 of a mile divided by your hours, which is 1/8 of the hours. But how do you divide fractions? Remember, it's like the whole copy dot flip thing. So then you have to do this as 2/3 times the flipping of the second one, so 8/1. And then your answer for this would be 2 times 8, which is 16, and 3 times 1, which is 3. So 16/3 of a miles per hour, which you could plug in a calculator to get a decimal, but it's not really required. The problem doesn't say it wants it that way. But if you did that and you got 5.3 miles per hour, that would be okay. And that's how you do that. And that is all the problems that are directly related to proportions in the test. The test focuses mostly on percentages, which is what we're going to spend the whole rest of the video on. And even some of this video was percentages too, those is-off problems. So most of the test is on percentages. I'll see you guys then. And on the next video, we're going to be doing the rest of the problems on the test that has to do with percentages.